Hey, you guys, Erin here. I am dropping in to talk with you about the lunar nodes changing zodiac signs. The north node has been coming through the sign of Aries, and the south node has been going through the sign of Libra since July of 2023. Well, on January 11th, to be very specific, at 3:02 p.m. Pacific time, the north node moves into the sign of Pisces and the south node moves into the sign of Virgo, and they will be there until July of 2026. Now, this is a very big deal. It's always a big deal when the nodes change signs. Okay, but this time especially is very, very strong, and I will explain to you why. I think the best way for me to lay out this recording is I'm going to start out by talking about what the nodes are. I know a lot of people have no idea what the lunar nodes are, and that's totally understandable because they're certainly not talked about in your average conversation out there. But they're very, very powerful. In fact, in real traditional ancient astrology, they're said to be more powerful than the sun and the moon. Okay, and I'll explain to you why that is as well. So we'll talk about what the nodes are, how they work, like what they do for us here on Earth, which is very, very significant, okay, has a lot to do with our destiny, okay? These nodes rule over the journey of our soul, okay? So I will explain to you why they work that way, but they also are what make eclipses happen, okay? And a lot of people don't understand how powerful eclipses are because, of course, most people are going, we have an eclipse all the time, and nothing happens to me on the day of an eclipse. Well, it doesn't necessarily usually happen on the day of an eclipse. It's usually within 2 weeks before the eclipse or within 2 weeks after the eclipse, but really the energy goes on for an entire year. And if I'm getting real technical, it really carries on for about 18 and a half years, okay? And what they do is eclipses bring energy into one area of our life and drain energy out to another area of our life. We all receive it as a collective, but it's also very, very unique to each and every one of us, okay? So we'll talk about that. I'm also going to really break down the sign of Pisces for you, okay? Because that's where the north node is going through. And not only that, but we are receiving an extremely heavy dose of Pisces energy because it's not just the north node going through the sign of Pisces. The north node is what pumps energy in, and it's going to be right next to Neptune when it moves into the sign of Pisces, which Neptune is one of Pisces' rulers. So we're just going to be dumping, or this Piscean energy is just going to be dumping on all of us. You don't have to have anything in your natal chart in the sign of Pisces. You're still going to be receiving a very heavy dose of this Piscean energy, okay? But especially if you've got your sun, your Mercury, your Mars, your Jupiter, whatever it is, your moon, even if it's your Saturn, whatever it is in the sign of Pisces, that thing is going to be very heavily activated. Okay. Now, again, but it doesn't matter if you don't have anything in the sign of Pisces, it's still somewhere in your natal chart. Okay. Then we're also going to talk about the sign of Virgo because that's where the south node is. The south node is what drains energy away. So it's like this Virgoan energy, this Virgoan influence is going to be draining away, again, for all of us as a collective, but also for us as individuals. Now, if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review the video recording to see which house in your natal chart the sign of Pisces comes through and which house the sign of Virgo comes through in your own natal chart. If you're just familiar with your natal chart, you can go look to, I know a lot of people use Placidus, and that's totally okay. Then it might be taking, you might have the sign of Pisces coming through 2 different houses in your natal chart and the sign of Virgo coming through 2 different houses in your own natal chart. Okay, so that is how we can see, is it coming through the area of your life that rules over your career, relationships, finances, your communication skills, your karma, your physical health. It's got to be coming through somewhere in your natal chart. Okay, so and if you'd like to get a reading with me, you can schedule a reading through erinwageastrology.com. Okay, so I'll pull up the charts for both of the eclipses, the first 2 eclipses of this year. We're going to have a lunar eclipse first in March, then we're going to have a solar eclipse in March. So I'll show you the charts for that. We will also be having another set of eclipses in September, but that's so far down the road in this year. I'll pull those up later on this year. And you can always, anytime we have any kind of a lunar transit or, anything powerful that's astrological going on, I'll always put an in-depth video out, at least 4 or 5 days before that. So I'll go even more into depth about these eclipses as we approach them. Okay, but we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of them in this recording. Okay, so yeah, there's that. Let's just start here. Let's start by talking about what the nodes are. Okay, so they're not planets at all. The word node is kind of like Latin for the word knot, as in K-N-O-T. These nodes are what tie the moon's ecliptic, these nodes of these knots are what tie the moon's orbit, I should say, the moon's orbit to the ecliptic plane. Okay, and these nodes, everybody has, to be clear here, I'm going to be talking about the nodes that are up in the sky, the transiting nodes in this recording, but we all have the lunar nodes somewhere in our natal chart. Okay, so it's like when you were born, when you took your first breath of air, the north node was somewhere and the south node was somewhere. They're always exactly opposite each other. And it's like those are the points that pierce through the ecliptic plane when we're born, and they have a massive influence on the direction we're meant to go in this life. Like basically whatever zodiac sign the south node was in when you were born, the energy of that zodiac sign is something you've already mastered, and you're meant to move beyond that energy. In fact, I've seen it many, many times that people are just making poor decisions in their life. And it really does manifest in so many different ways. And so much of this can be seen in the natal chart. But some people will have a very difficult time getting beyond the energy of their south node. It's like where the instincts are. Let's say your south node is in the sign of Aries. And if you're just continuously holding on to that Aries energy, you're basically like keeping your head just barely above water. Okay. Now, whatever zodiac sign the north node was in when you took your first breath of air, that's the direction we're meant to go in. It's like basically you're receiving rewards by taking on the energy, I should say, the qualities of the zodiac sign that the north node was in when you were born. Okay, a lot of astrologers will refer to that north node as our destiny, which is true to a certain extent. But the only reason, I just have to be very clear, that north node is not, it's not rainbows and butterflies. It's not just a glittery point that we go to. It's actually the north node is the dragon's head. The south node is the dragon's tail, and they're very aggressive points. Basically, to summarize this, I'm getting a little carried away here, but in our natal chart, it's like we're going towards that north node. You're never going to entirely leave your south node behind. It's always there, but that's when we're like kind of surfing towards the energy of our north node. That's where the rewards are. Okay. So, and if you've had a reading with me, you can go look to see generally speaking, every time I give a reading, it's one of the things that I always put a lot of emphasis on is the nodes. So you can go back and review that to see what sign your north node is in and what sign your south node is in, and how you can obtain the qualities of your destiny. Okay. So that's what the nodes are. Now, the mythology behind the nodes, the Hindu mythology, okay? In Hindu astrology, the north node is Rahu, which is the dragon's head. The south node is Ketu, which is the dragon's tail. Now, I've really studied these guys in depth because to me, they're the most fascinating thing to study in astrology. I mean, I love studying all kinds of things in astrology, but the nodes just fascinate the heck out of me. Two really good books by Judith Hill. One is The Lunar Nodes and Your Key to Excellent Chart Interpretation. And then another one is Eclipses and You. Okay. Those are both really good books. There's a lot of really good books on the nodes. You can even read about the nodes online. Just recognize that when you're reading stuff online, sometimes it can get a little fluffy. Anyway, that's what I love about Judith Hill. She leaves the fluff out and talks about the real traditional energy of these zodiac, of these particular nodes. Okay, so the story is that Lord Vishnu was going around and passing out something called the Amrita, which is the potion for eternal life. Okay, but this Amrita, the potion for eternal life, was only meant for certain gods. Okay, so Lord Vishnu is going out to the particular gods that are meant to take this Amrita. Well, in the original story, it was a demon, at least the best of my understanding. The original story, it was a demon. Okay, and somehow over time, it got sort of converted into being a dragon. So the demon of the dragon came and stole the magic potion for eternal life. Okay, and then went off and drank it. So now this demon or dragon has eternal life. But what happened was the sun and the moon caught him. They caught the demon and they brought him back to Lord Vishnu, say, hey, we got him. And yes, he still has eternal life because he drank the potion, but we got him. And so as punishment, Lord Vishnu cut off the demon or the dragon's head. That is the north node or Rahu, okay? The south node, again, that's the dragon's tail. That would be Ketu. There's other names for this. What is it? I've got some notes here. In Western, the north node can be referred to as, I hope I'm pronouncing this properly, Caput Draconis, and the south node is Kata Draconis, okay, as in dragon, or sometimes just referred to as Caput and Kata. Most people recognize them as the north node and the south node, or Rahu and Ketu, okay? Now, the north node is basically like if you can think of it as a pump, it's like, again, the dragon's head that's like breathing fire in versus the dragon's tail is where energy goes out. So it's like a pump that pumps energy in, and the south node is draining energy out. So whatever zodiac signs the north node is going through, we're receiving a very strong dose of that particular influence from that particular zodiac sign. Whatever zodiac sign the south node is going through, that is being drained out. And in fact, so the north node is kind of associated with more of a material influence, like materialistic energy or physical energy. Sometimes it can even be associated with greed, okay? Because if you're just, this is what I want in this life. I want all this material stuff. Oh, I want the physical stuff. I want to be rich. Blah, blah, blah. That is very... that's very north node-ish, okay? Which of course that's not necessarily best for our karma to be associated with greed, but it's still we want to obtain those qualities of that zodiac sign that our north node is in, versus the south node is much more of like a spiritual point. It's like the point of detachment or the point of self-undoing, okay? And the south node it could be kind of a sorrowful point because, we get attached to things, and it's sometimes very difficult to let that something go, okay? Whether it be a relationship or a car or a house or a family member or an animal, whatever it is, it's like that south node can take things away. And in fact, going back to when people get stuck in their south node, again, so it might be difficult. If you're really new to this stuff, understand that there's a difference between, somewhat of a difference between the nodes that are in our natal chart, okay, because those are personal to you. Mostly what I'm going to be talking about in this video is the nodes that are up in the sky, would be referred to as the transiting lunar nodes. But the nodes that are in your natal chart, if you're stuck in the energy of the zodiac sign that your south node is in, and you're barely being able to keep your head above water in this lifetime, that can definitely happen. In fact, the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary basically interprets the south node as the point of sorrows brought on by errors of the flesh. Okay, so that south node can be kind of, it's a drain point, but we're supposed to let things go. We're supposed to move on to unfamiliar territory, that sort of thing. Okay, so there's that. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull up the chart, what the chart looks like for the day that these nodes change signs. So again, this will be January 11th, again, specifically at 3:02 p.m. Pacific time. And it's not like, all of a sudden everybody at 3:02 p.m. Pacific time is going to be like, whoa, feel this. Some people will. So it depends on how it's hitting your chart. If you've got anything in the late degrees of the sign of Pisces, you might feel this immediately. And I'll explain to you why. Okay, so what I work with, by the way, is Western astrology, geocentric Western astrology. Now, what we're looking at is basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac for January 11th at 3:02 p.m. Pacific time. This right here is the symbol for the north node, and this right here is the symbol for the south node. Again, they're always opposite each other because, again, they're what hold the moon's orbit to the ecliptic plane, exactly opposite from each other. And not only that, but they go backwards through the zodiac. They're not in retrograde 100% of the time, but they're in retrograde more than they move forward. So that's why some people might think to themselves, well, gee, if it was the North Node is in Aries and now it's moving to Pisces, how does that work? It's because they basically go backwards through the zodiac. Okay. Now, again, there's the North Node. It might be really tough to see if you're on a phone. The charts that I pull up when I show you the eclipses, it'll be easier to see the glyphs for the zodiac signs. But if you can see this, that right there is the glyph for the sign of Pisces. And this right here is the glyph for the sign of Virgo. That one Virgo light green color is probably very difficult to see, especially if you're on a phone. But let's follow along as best as we can. Okay, so let's start by talking about the sign of Pisces. Pisces is like the mystic of the zodiac, okay? Pisces is the sign of psychic capabilities. It's ruled by, this is where things get really important. It's ruled by Jupiter and Neptune, okay? And it's really traditionally, like in ancient astrology, it's ruled by Jupiter. In modern astrology, it's ruled by Neptune. I can totally understand not only mathematically why it's ruled by both, but also energetically why it's ruled by both. But Jupiter is like the bringer of faith, okay? Jupiter has a lot to do with religion. The sign of Pisces, the motto is, I believe, okay? But Neptune, the modern ruler for the sign of Pisces, Neptune is really the bringer of psychic capabilities, okay? Neptune, there's a lot to be said here. Neptune is like, we all have boundaries. Everybody has boundaries, all different sorts of boundaries. Okay, but one of those sets of boundaries is psychic boundaries. So we're not just picking up every little thing when we're around other people. You know, nobody wants to feel everybody else's stuff. Okay, but what Neptune, we all have those boundaries. Pisces has the least amount of boundaries, clearly, out of all the zodiac signs. And that's due to Neptune being one of its rulers. Neptune is what puts holes in those boundaries, called psychic porousness. It's why the sign of Pisces is like the psychic. There's other signs that are also very psychic, but generally speaking, when, you know, if you're taking a quiz, if it's which sign is most psychic, usually it's really the sign of Pisces. And again, that's coming from Neptune being its ruler. Because Neptune not only puts holes in those psychic boundaries, but Neptune is dreams, okay? Neptune, how should I lay this out? Neptune is Poseidon in Greek mythology, which Poseidon is the god of the sea. Pisces is the fish. I'll get deeper into that in just a minute here. But when we think about the sea, the flowing energy of the sea, okay, the constant shifting of the tides, that sort of thing. It's dreams. Neptune actually rules drugs, okay? And when I say drugs, I'm not necessarily talking about stimulating like methamphetamine or something like that. It can be, of course, but because I know that stuff affects everybody differently. But it's really, you know, if you've ever taken any kind of an opiate before, a painkiller or muscle relaxer, that sort of thing, that's very Neptunian, okay? When somebody's going under anesthesia for surgery, that's very Neptunian. Neptune is, and the sign of Pisces both are like the most unearthly, the most dreamy energy, okay? And in fact, okay, let's get into this. Here's Neptune and here's that North Node. Because that North Node is like a pump, okay? Anything that it's next to, it's pumping the energy of that thing in with it, okay? So it's already going through the sign of Pisces at 29 degrees, by the way, is the anaretic degree. It's very, very strong. But then it's got Neptune and Pisces, poof, even more of that energy coming in, okay? But Neptune's been going through the sign of Pisces since 2011. And when we think about the opioid epidemic, I mean, I've never even seen fentanyl in my life, but there's a channel on YouTube that's called The Soft White Underbelly. There's this guy who lives in LA. I think his name is Mark something, lives in LA, and he interviews all different types of people, but a lot of them are coming in from Skid Row. And a lot of them it's not like, I mean, they clearly admit to being addicted to fentanyl, but you can also see it in them. You can see their eyes kind of like floating around. I don't mean to laugh because it's honestly tragic. It's very tragic. But that the floating eyes is very Neptunian, very, very Piscean. Okay. And so we're all just receiving that energy. And going back to Neptune going through Pisces since 2011 or 2012. I think it started in 2011, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of people started having these super strong spiritual awakenings in 2011. Okay. And it got stronger. I mean, as I've said so many times before, I can't believe some of the people that I've seen, doing spiritual meditation retreats, people I never would have thought they would, be into that sort of thing. I know all the tech companies, Google, Apple, all of a sudden they've brought in, meditation stations and, that sort of thing. In fact, I was even invited to go give an astrology presentation for Google. But that's Neptune going through Pisces, influencing all that stuff. Again, opioid epidemics, drug epidemics, really. Delusions. There's been a lot of delusions going on. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. But also it's that dreamy spiritual energy. A lot of people's intuitions have been skyrocketing, especially if you have kept your physical vessel clean of things that would interrupt that, things that heavy drugs and that sort of thing. If you've got a clean vessel and Neptune's doing something in your natal chart, boom, all of a sudden it's like you're super tapped in. Okay. But we all are going to be receiving an extra heavy dose of that. Okay. And I also want to point this out that it's like for people who are already, just be very mindful of substance abuse. Neptune actually rules addictions as well. And I'm talking about anything, really, any kind of thing that would put you in an altered state of consciousness. And turns out I am a Pisces and I happen to enjoy altered states of consciousness thoroughly, but I also got a pretty good grip on, not getting carried away. It's something that I've had to be very mindful about my entire life. And at this point in my life, now I know exactly how to manage those things. But that's just something, especially if this is hitting something in your chart, if it's trining something in your chart or opposing or squaring something in your chart, and say you already had some sort of an addiction to something, all of a sudden it comes back into your life. We could be talking about alcohol, whatever it is. Just be very, very mindful of that. Okay, now, in fact, I'll just leave that there. But, okay, going back to the sign of Pisces. Pisces is the fish. Again, it's this watery energy, but it's two fish that are tied together, swimming in opposite directions. And I've heard a couple of different descriptions of why this is, but I think my two favorite is that the one fish is in the physical realm and the other fish is swimming in the spiritual realm. Okay. And they're tied together because the one in the physical realm is like, hey, you can't just go swim out into utopia quite yet. We have this physical experience to finish up first. But another one is that they're constantly shifting through the emotional currents. Again, water in Western astrology is directly associated with emotions and feelings and sensitivities and empathy. Okay. A lot of empaths have been, real people realizing how much of an empath they are since 2011. And I think it really started picking up in 2012. But, okay, you'll notice a lot of Pisces people will shift through emotions. It's like 1 minute Pisces needs to go. And by the way, I'm not just talking about Pisces sun at all. It could be Pisces sun, Pisces rising, Pisces moon, Pisces Mercury, even Pisces Mars, Pisces Venus people. It really is so unique to everybody. Not every Pisces is going to fit all these little descriptions of the sign of Pisces. But say you're Pisces with like everything else in Capricorn, that would stabilize you a little bit more. But Pisces people, true Piscean people, have some kind of either strong Pisces, something going on in their natal chart in the sign of Pisces, or if they got some sort of strong Neptune energy going on in their natal chart. Let's say their sun is in the sign of Capricorn, but when they were born, Neptune was right next to their sun. They all of a sudden can pick up more of those Piscean qualities. Okay. So again, we're all going to be receiving that. So Pisces, it's a mutable water sign represented by the fish. The motto is, I believe, ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. Okay, now, but again, super heavy dose. Really, especially the first half of 2025, and especially in March, the amount of, we're going to have, Saturn's been going through Pisces here as well since March of 2023, and will basically be there till February of 2026. 2025, Saturn's actually going to pop into the sign of Aries briefly, but then retrograde back into Pisces. So for the most part, we will have Neptune, the North Node, Saturn, and then at a certain point, we're going to have Venus go through the sign of Pisces and Mercury go through the sign of Pisces, and then they're going to retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. And it's just at a certain point on February 28th, we'll have a new moon in Pisces. It's going to be the sun, the moon, the North Node, Neptune, Saturn. I think Mercury's there for that, just a very strong Piscean influence coming in. So again, for everybody. And this, not only that, but I'd also say the sign of Cancer would be trining this, is going to get hit also while Mars is going, the water signs are heavily activated. But really for everybody, you don't even have to have a single planet in the sign of Pisces or the sign of Virgo. And this is still very strong for all of us. That's one of the reasons it's so good to get familiar with our natal charts. We can see, oh my gosh, this is coming through my house of finances, or oh my gosh, this is coming through my house of karma, my house of communication. There's all these different areas of our life that it could be coming through. Okay, so there's that. Now let's drop on down here and talk about the sign of Virgo, where the South Node is. So the South Node, again, the drain point where energy goes out. The sign of Virgo it's always opposite. In fact, this right here where it's green, that's all to represent the sign of Virgo. This right here is all to represent the sign of Pisces. They're always exactly opposite each other in the zodiac. And so when you think about that, it's like Virgo's kind of opposite Pisces, okay? The one thing that they have in common is they're both mutable, okay? They're both adaptive. The sign of Virgo is it's the adaptive or the mutable earth sign. Now, when we think about the elements in astrology, earth, air, water, fire, which one do you think is the most dense and stable? Earth. Okay, so Virgo's much more stabilized than the sign of Pisces. Virgo can also hang out with all different types of people because it's adaptable, but it's the one that pays very close attention to detail. Okay, the sign of Virgo, the motto is I analyze. It's ruled by Mercury. Okay, Mercury is really, to summarize this, Mercury is the intake of information, like information going into our consciousness. Mercury's filing that information somewhere into our consciousness. And then when we want to communicate that information, Mercury brings that information back out. So it's like the input and the output of information. Mercury is the messenger of the gods. But with that said, Mercury wants to stay organized because it wants to know all that, where that information is. The sign of Virgo is very much about organization, keeping things organized, okay? But also the sign of Virgo, it's kind of like the sign of our physical body. It actually rules the intestines. The liver also has a little bit of influence on the gallbladder, also has an influence on the nervous system. But really, when we think about the intestines, which, hallelujah, more and more people are starting to realize this, and the intestines it's like, if our intestines are not functioning optimally, there's no chance for our brain to be functioning optimally. Same thing for the liver. These are very important parts of our physical vessel, ruled by the sign of Virgo. Okay, and I'm going to actually jump back up to the sign of Pisces in a minute and talk about the body parts for the sign of Pisces. But that sign of Virgo, it's like it's really generally described as the sign of health and being of service. It's a work. All the earth signs have to do with work. I'm talking about, like, doesn't even have to be work that you're getting financial compensation for. It's about being of service. Okay, so there's something about that being drained out. Going back up to the sign of Pisces, Pisces is more like what could be described as like mental health, but it's, in my opinion, it's more like spiritual health. I was watching this comedian a couple of years ago. I don't remember what his name was, but it was a show my brother brought me to. And the comedian was talking about how he'd always been like I guess he described himself as an atheist, just, oh, no spiritual stuff for me. Da, da, da. And then he was talking about that he ended up getting severely depressed and realized mental health is declining. And he opened himself up. He didn't go into too much detail, but he opened himself up to some more like spiritual energies, spiritual practices. And it really lifted him up. His spiritual health and mental health started, getting better once he opened himself up to that. That's very Piscean energy. Okay, so physical health for Virgo, mental, spiritual health for Pisces. But also the sign of Pisces, it rules the feet. Okay, you might want to be a little bit mindful of your feet as we experience this transit. And then again, kind of throughout the entire year of 2025 and even the first half of 2026. But Pisces also rules the lymphatic system, which the lymphatic system, I mean, really the sign of Pisces kind of has some rulership over all the fluids in the body, but it's very specifically the extracellular matrix. Great book by Matthew Wood on the extracellular matrix, but it's the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is one of the hardest things to take care of, okay? But it's also has a massive impact on our physical health, okay? I know there's some new talk coming out, which is probably going to be very new news to some people, but that we don't technically have an immune system. Like we've got a nervous system, we've got a lymphatic system, but where is the actual technical immune system? I mean, I understand why we have an immune system, but where I'm going with this is that really that lymphatic system is how we keep our immunity strong. Okay, so really the polarity between these signs, between Virgo and Pisces, are the two signs that have the most significant influence on our physical health. Okay, so it's really a very important time throughout this year of 2025, the first half of 2026, taking care of our physical health. Every day is important to do that, but especially when we're experiencing a transit like this. Okay, so there's that. I hope I covered that well enough. Now what I want to do is I want to pull up the first eclipse we're having this year, which would be a total lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. Okay, now, where should I begin here? Let's start out. This happens on March 13th, 2025. It's anytime we have a lunar eclipse, we have to be having a full moon, and I'll explain that to you in just a moment. But the full moon peaks at 11:55 p.m. Pacific time. Now, this is a powerful eclipse. It's a total lunar eclipse, and it's visible, I think, throughout the entire United States. I would not personally recommend going out and trying to observe an eclipse. Now, and I know a lot of people do, and they say, I didn't notice anything, I didn't have a problem with that. But when you think about, see here, this is what happens. Obviously, we have a full moon every month, okay? Sometimes we have 2 full moons in a month, but for the most part, we have a full moon every single month. And what happens is we have a full moon. Here's the moon, here's the sun. They're exactly opposite each other every single time we have a full moon. But when we have a full moon and the north and the south node are right next to the sun and the moon, that's what makes it a lunar eclipse, okay? And when we think about these nodes, the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, that I don't recommend being out there and observing this. And most of our ancestors knew this. And I really mean most of our ancestors knew this. There's all kinds of stories. The Hopi would go out and smash ceramic pots at the time of an eclipse because, and some people say that was to scare the dragon away. But from my understanding, it's more like they're breaking something so that they don't end up breaking something within their physical vessel or in their environment. That was their purpose for breaking the pots. Also stories of the Hopi and all kinds of civilizations going and hiding in caves when we have an eclipse. Okay, now, again, I know plenty of people that go out there and observe an eclipse, and more power to you, man. But I'll tell you from my own personal experience, when I really started to want to understand eclipses, like the 2017 Great American Eclipse is a solar eclipse. It was like I'd already been studying astrology for years, but I wanted to take that energy on. So I went out and I went to this natural spring and I put my feet in the water and I was smoking a joint and just ready to take it on right at the time of the eclipse. Woof. And I've told this story before. I apologize if you've already heard it, but I kid you not. I am somebody who I don't get anxiety. I just don't. There's other things that go on. I worry about everything constantly. The difference is it's like when I'm worried, I'm like, oh my God, I'm worried about my dog. I'm worried about this. But it's not, I don't have this nervousness. I don't have anxiousness. But that day, like literally the moment the eclipse happened and all throughout the entire day, kind of even going into the next day, I could not believe it. I was like, holy shit, this is what people feel. This is what anxiety is. It was off. I felt like every cell in my body was trembling. So that's my own experience. I also have teachers who've told me stories, one in particular, where this teacher wanted to take an experiment and take a tincture right at the moment of an eclipse and ended up paralyzing half of their body. And they were able to reverse that, but it's very, very serious. I also have another friend who's a complete and utter health person. Okay. I mean, like they eat very healthy and I take all my immune boosters and da. But this is somebody who takes it to a whole nother level and wanted to go out and observe an eclipse and did and ended up sick for months. Okay. Somebody who does not get sick ended up sick for months. But trust me, I also know plenty of people who've gone out and watched the eclipse and be like, well, this is fine. Nothing happened to me. But it's really not somebody who truly understands eclipses doesn't necessarily want to go subject themselves to that. Okay. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. Every time we have an eclipse, I just go inside. Actually, there was another time. This happened 2 years ago where I have a very senior dog who at this point is now 20 years old. Okay. But this was just a couple of years ago, and having a senior dog, when the dog's got to go potty, you got to take the dog outside immediately to go potty. You can't, so he had to go potty, and he's just a little guy. He's just like a little Chihuahua Terrier mix, and he's adorable. But he had to go potty, so I'd take him outside, and all of a sudden, I feel it. I feel the anxiety, and I was like, oh no. And I realized the eclipse was happening like right then. And I was like, and I could see it. I could sense it. I could, every little part about it. And I was like, come on, Nico. I ran back inside and surrounded myself with all my protective gemstones and meditated and calmed down. And it was over in a moment, but it wasn't nearly as severe as that 2017 experience. But that's my own personal, and I think I might be a little extra sensitive because I was born very close to a total lunar eclipse. So there's that. You want to go out and watch an eclipse, by all means, but that's just not what I'll be doing. Okay, so what's going on here is because it's a Pisces season, basically the first 3 weeks of March is Pisces season. But the last week and a half of February to the first 3 weeks of March is when it's Pisces season every year. So the sun would be in the sign of Pisces here. There's that north node right next to they could literally be, I think, up to 17, 18 degrees away from the nodes, and it's still going to be an eclipse. But this is very strong because the sun's at 23 degrees Pisces and north node's at 27 degrees Pisces, and there's Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. All this, again, that north node pumps energy in, so it's pumping this Piscean energy in with the sun and Neptune, and then there's Saturn. I really do hope that Saturn going through Pisces brings a little more structure. Saturn's very rigid. Saturn is like the bringer of discipline, okay? And he makes things cold and constricted. Okay, so we don't generally think Saturn's considered the great malefic, okay, in astrology. So a lot of people are terrified of Saturn, but which is justified. But at the same time, Saturn is really what brings structure. Usually comes with some very hard lessons, but brings structure. So I'm hoping Saturn can kind of stabilize some of this so flowy energy of sign of Pisces. But okay, so there's that. We're all going to be receiving this heavy dose of this. If you have anything between 20 and 29 degrees and 59 minutes Pisces, whatever it is, let's say it's Mercury. And Mercury, again, mental function. It's like all of a sudden you're receiving psychic downloads that you can't even explain. Okay, I would keep ourselves protected. I know a lot of people are on a very strong spiritual journey and they want to enhance their intuition and their psychic capabilities, which is fine and beautiful, but also be mindful. You might tap into things you want nothing to do with, okay? For protective stones, I usually work with black tourmaline. There's really like any of the darker stones, like this right here is black kyanite. My tourmaline's in the bedroom right now, so I'm not going to get that. But shungite can be really good. Anything, even agate, like the darker agates can be really good for protection. Another thing is that I do this all the time, is I envision a gold and white light around myself, basically like a bubble of gold and white light. And I do that, if I'm in some kind of a sketchy situation, honestly, that I do that every time I go into an airport. I do not like airports. I don't like flying, but I don't like airports even more than I don't like flying. Don't know what it is. Banks too. I get really yucky feelings when I'm in that kind of an environment where I don't know why it is, but I vision this gold and white light around myself. And it's so interesting because I did this just kind of intuitively since I was much, much, much younger. And it just so happens one time I was taking a class, and it was my favorite teacher talking, and she said the same exact thing. She said that she did the same exact thing, envision this gold and white light. I was like, oh my gosh, it must be some sort of an intuitive thing. But even my car, like if I have to park my car in like a sketchy part of a town and, go down the block or whatever, I'll envision that gold and white light around my car to keep it protected. So that's, it might sound very woo-woo to some people, but that's what I like to do. Okay. Now, and also again, bringing up I would definitely stay away from using any kind of, the substance that's I know a lot of people are doing ayahuasca these days, mushrooms, microdosing, and which I don't have any problem with that stuff at all. But again, as long as we're doing it in a fairly healthy way. But let's say you were to have a couple glasses of wine. Let's say you always have a couple glasses of wine, but all of a sudden this night you had a couple glasses of wine. You might feel way more drunk than you would on a normal night. Okay, so there's that. Then here we have that moon next to the south node. So if you've got anything between 20 degrees and 29 degrees and 59 minutes, Virgo, that there's something being drained away from there. Okay, let's say it's your Mercury. Okay, Mercury again, mental function. All of a sudden, your mental function's not up to par at all. Like, why can't I focus? What the hell's going on here? Or let's say it's your Mars and you just like a lack of energy. Okay, it really just depends on what it is in your chart. But even if you have nothing in the sign of Virgo, it's still for everybody. It's Virgo and energy is being drained out, and you can see which house in your natal chart it's being drained out of, which area of your life it's being drained out of, what theme of your life is this drain point going through. And to also give you a little bit of a description here, it's like when we have the eclipse, and by the way, I do have notes here for, okay, this particular eclipse on March, that my notes? On March 13th, 2025, the eclipse, the actual eclipse begins at 8:57 p.m., but the maximum eclipse is at 11:58 p.m. Pacific time. If you're in a different time zone than Pacific, which I know a lot of you are, you're going to have to convert that yourself. But so actually, for a lot of you out there, this would technically be on March 14th. Keep that in mind. But the maximum eclipse would be at 11:58 p.m. Pacific time on March 13th. And then the eclipse is over at 3 a.m. Pacific time on March 14th. Okay. But the way it works is it's like, okay, well, the sun's close to the north node. We're all receiving that Pisces energy. At the moment of the eclipse, okay, from the second it starts till the second it ends, especially when it's in the maximum, eclipse form, it's like our source energy. I mean, the sun and the moon are the brightest lights in the sky. That's where we get our energy from. Of course, we get it from all sorts of things as well, but they're clearly the brightest and the most significant lights in the sky. So when that eclipse is happening, it's almost like our connection is cut off momentarily, and then as soon as the eclipse is over, it's a surge, a powerful surge of the energy coming in through the North Node and going out through the South Node. Okay, so there's that. And keep in mind, these nodes, they rule over the journey of our soul. So I would definitely be mindful about that. Okay, now let's go to the next eclipse, which would be the solar eclipse. Now, this one's going to get a little trippy. I'll do the best I can to describe it. But the reason why I say it's a little tricky is because technically this would be in the sign of Aries, and I'll explain why. So this is the solar eclipse. This is not, from my understanding, from what I could find, this is not visible in the United States, okay? And it's just a partial solar eclipse, but that's still very, very powerful, okay? So this takes place on March 29th at 3:58 a.m. Pacific time. Now, if you notice, here's that North Node, here's Saturn, here's Venus and Neptune, all still going to the sign of Pisces. But at this point, the very end of March, the sun is now in the sign of Aries, okay? And anytime we have a solar eclipse, we have to be having a new moon. Anytime we have a new moon, it means the sun and the moon are in the exact same spot. Here we have the sun at 9 degrees Aries and 0 minutes, and the moon at 9 degrees Aries and 0 minutes. Okay, that's the new moon. In fact, this is a super moon as well, by the way. But there's still within a close enough range to the North Node for this to be an eclipse, okay? Now, so this would be a North Node solar eclipse, and technically in the sign of Aries, but we're still going to be receiving a lot of that Pisces energy, okay? And in fact, this eclipse in Aries, this would be the last eclipse we will have in the sign of Aries for 18 and a half years, I believe. So it's like a wrap up, because last year we already had eclipses going through the sign of Aries and Libra, but we had a total solar eclipse on April 8th of 2024. This is kind of a closure to that. We would also just follow along as best you can. If this is going over your head, don't worry about it. We will be having a new moon in the sign of Pisces. I believe that's February 28th. And of course, I'll be putting more in-depth videos out about this as we approach these transits. But that new moon in Pisces, again, I think it's February 28th, it's going to be the sun and the moon will be too far away from the North Node. This is the new moon where the sun and the moon are closest to that North Node. Okay, so if you got anything in your chart and you're 9 degrees Aries, there's energy coming in. But still, if you've got anything in those late degrees of Pisces, really you could even go as low as like 15 degrees Pisces, all the way up to 29 degrees and 59 minutes Pisces. All this energy is coming in, and it's still, that South Node's still there. Even though there's nothing around that South Node, it's still draining energy out through the sign of Virgo. But this is really, really powerful stuff. Even though it's very much a partial solar eclipse, and again, I don't think it's visible anywhere in the United States. It might be, but I don't think so. It's still, I would not be outside exposing myself to this. I just wouldn't. I've learned my lesson. Okay. Again, maybe some of you, in fact, I have a very, very good friend who, what did he use? He used like a welding mask to go look at last year's total solar eclipse. Ended up with some very wild results of what he could see. But his strong guy is Leo, is able to manage that and seem to be just fine. But that's not anything I would do. Okay, so there's that. I think I will leave that there. Some final words here. I would just be very, stay grounded. And this whole year of 2025, this is so important to understand. 2025 is absolutely off the charts wild, okay? And I am somebody, if you go back and review my videos from previous years, I'm always like, oh yeah, of course, astrology is always showing something very significant. Of course, 2020 was a wild rocker. I mean, any astrologer knew that. I remember back in 2019 looking at the chart for 2020 and going, oh my God. But this, I'm generally like, it's just flowing through the changes. 2025 is the year of change, the year of change, 2025 and 2026, even 2027. And I already put a video out about this. It's what a lot of people refer to as the outer planets. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all changing zodiac signs. Saturn's changing signs. Jupiter changes signs every year, so that's not that big of a deal. But all of them, everything is changing signs. Massive Mars retrograde, really strong stuff going on. So when we take all this into consideration and realize that we're receiving that Piscean energy, it's so important not to go into escapism. Okay, and what I mean by that is a lot of Pisces, very, very Piscean people, again, not just Pisces sun, but any strong Pisces placement or Neptune conjunction or something like that, you'll notice when something intense or, responsibility needs to be taken care of, a lot of that Piscean energy wants to escape from it. Like, well, okay, I'll just kind of float over here and do my own thing, which in certain situations, of course, that's absolutely justified and can probably help in some situations. But also escapism with drugs or alcohol or anything like that. Like, I just don't want to deal with it. I'm going to go cry in my room for a while. I don't think, to a certain degree, of course, some of that is healthy, but I don't think I would let that really take over my whole life throughout this year of 2025. And again, especially the first half of 2026. It's like, let's go in with strength. Like, hold on. Like, this is going to be a rocky ride. And again, major changes. I think there's going to be new social media platforms that we can't even perceive right now. I think there's going to be new forms of communication, new forms of like Uber sort of stuff, like like commuting from one location to another. I think there's going to be all new ways of doing that. I think there's going to be robots and AI and all kinds of stuff that is really potent stuff. So, and for some people love it. Some people are like, oh yeah, put that neural link in my brain. I'm ready for this. I want to become a robot. That's not me. I'd like to stay human, but I do think we're going to start to see all kinds of really strong stuff. In fact, one more thing I'll mention about that is that I think what's going to happen between now and 2027, and I could get really specific, but I think it's going to happen more than once. So it's like all this new stuff, all this new technological development. I think it's something very traumatic, something very like almost shattering is going to happen. Okay. I think we're all going to be okay. Just keep ourselves safe and grounded. And, I'm not saying don't go. We also got to go have fun. We got to go do the things that we enjoy. We got to travel if that's what you like to do. We got to, whatever it is you got to do. But I think something really big is going to happen that is going to create something where there's going to be new regulations on these technological advancements and that sort of thing. I think it's going to be a big deal. But again, I think it's not just one that's going to happen. There could potential for war. United States, Uranus return. Again, I already made a big video about this. Astrology forecast for 2025, if you want to go watch that. But overall, I think it's probably in all of our best interest to still have fun, but keep ourselves safe and comfortable and understand that other people are probably, it's like, I see a post the other day on Instagram. I was like, guess who's going through a hard time? And it was like everyone, and it's like when you realize that everybody's got their own thing going on, inflation, everything is very, very difficult for a lot of people right now. So keep that in mind and keep kindness in your heart. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. Again, if you want to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.